many versus the few. Please join in welcoming Patrick.
Thank you. Are there any Star Trek fans in here? Jesse, that was a little too fast, actually. So you've seen Wrath of Khan. Everyone's seen this movie. I don't care if you're not a Star Trek fan. Wrath of Khan, the last scene, one of the last scenes, Mr. Spock gives himself his life for the crew by going into that tank with all those horrible gases, and he's going to die, but he has to fix the ship so that the crew survives. And you've got William Shatner who runs over panting and does his scream, "No, Mr. Spock!" And Mr. Spock, slowly comes up to the glass, does his little Vulcan sign and says, "Do not grieve, Admiral. 'Tis not logical." And then what is he? This is something that Mr. Spock always says. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. So this is actually a social theory called collectivism, and it makes a lot of sense on Vulcan and in other species like beehives. But for humans, it's been really controversial throughout the ages. There are a lot of forms of government that have embraced this collectivism, and these have mostly been tyrannical, like monarchies and oligarchies that were popular in the past and remain popular today. But also today we see it in socialism and communism. This was something our founding fathers were firmly against, which is why they wrote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." See, the founding fathers had just come from an English monarchy, which definitely believed in collectivism, and they were being abused by this monarchy. And so they didn't want to go to the other side, the other extreme, which is anarchy, where there's no government, but they decided that the appropriate government would be one that is strong enough to protect individual freedoms. And that's what we have today, or that's what they gave us at least. And so we see the opposite of this, especially in the 20th century after Karl Marx wrote his comments in the 1850s, and really communism took root in the 20th century with the Soviet Union and China especially. Think about the Soviet Union. You've got Joseph Stalin as the leader of the Soviet Union, and he really wanted to industrialize his country, which was good for the masses. He had about 110 million people living in the Soviet Union at the time. However, because of these changes that he forced upon the people, about 20 million individuals in the country were either starved, executed, or thrown into hard labor camps where they later died. This is collectivism, the needs of the many being served by the sacrifices of the few. Same thing happened in China under the leadership of Chairman Mao, who designed a program called the Great Leap Forward, where he was going to industrialize China so that it would be on par with the United States and with other European powers. And this would help Chinese, again, come into the 20th century with everyone else. However, unfortunately, there was a sacrifice to be made from the few. About 40 million Chinese citizens died during the Great Leap Forward, either starved again or executed. But that was nothing for this collectivist society that boasted over 500 million people. This is something that the founders were vehemently against, not only because they came from a monarchy and they were used to tyranny, but also because they came from a Judeo-Christian ethical background. See, the Bible talks quite a bit about individualism and collectivism. You've got scriptures like the lost sheep. And what does the shepherd do? He leaves his 99 and he goes after the one. Jesus constantly talked about the sanctity of individual freedoms. Can you imagine if Joseph Stalin had been the shepherd? He definitely would not have gone after, actually he would have gone after the one, he would have sent the KGB after the one and thrown him in the gulag so that his emaciated flock wouldn't have been influenced by this rebel. But we also have examples of collectivism in the Bible. In fact, the heart of Christianity kind of goes along with the scripture, greater love hath no man than this, that a man should lay down his life for his friends. Sacrifice of the one for the many. However, in this example, individual freedom is preserved. It says that the man lays down his life for his friends, not the friends force him to lay down his life for them, which is what collectivism is all about. It's the preservation of individual liberties that the founders were focused on when they wrote the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and the Bill of Rights. And these liberties, they said, were God-given. They were endowed by our Creator. Unfortunately, with the spread of communism and the Marxist ideas during the 20th century, we too began to change a little bit. We saw two examples I'll give you from earlier in the last century. Woodrow Wilson, during World War I, took into custody, interrogated, and incarcerated thousands of German Americans. Even in our own Fort Douglas, just a few miles north of here, a lot of these prisoners were taken without any due process of law. Same thing happened in World War II, you guys. This is more common knowledge about the Japanese Americans, about 110, 120,000 Japanese Americans who were put in internment camps on the West Coast. Now, this kind of activity, I think, if you asked Mr. Spock, he would say it is logical, because he was a very laconic sort of person. He would just say it's logical in time of war to do that kind of thing. However, in so doing, you have to throw away the Bill of Rights and the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. In fact, you have to throw away God, because we've already said that our Creator endowed us with these rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And if the state can take them away, that means the state must be the one who gives the rights in the first place. My challenge for you this week is, as you listen to the news, as you watch the TV, as you read your newspaper, I want you to look for ways our government today is sacrificing individual liberties for the collective good, supposed collective good. Ronald Reagan said, personal freedom is never more than a generation away from extinction. Mr. Toastmaster.